Hi everybody, Andrea Spencer here, Artist in Residence for Arts Care with the Northern Health and Social Care Trust. So I've had quite a few people asking me about how to use colour in a pleasing way. The Artist in Residence have been designing a lot of colouring sheets for people to use and print off, and people are wondering how to use colour and what colours go together. I've been asked if I could give any tips. So I thought today I would look at aspects of using colour within some of our colour sheet designs, looking at the colour wheel and how colours sit beside each other, and just some tips that I use when I'm colouring in the colour sheets. For this workshop I'm going to be using a range of markers, just regular felt tip pens, and also these highlighter pens, which is something that you may have at home. This is quite a nice range of highlighter pens, and what I like about the highlighters is that they have quite a lot of transparency to them, so you can overlay the colours and create a couple of colours within one area. So I'm going to show you, first of all, I'm going to look at the colour wheel using these two sets of markers. So to start off with, we have our three primary colours, red, yellow and blue. And then as the colours move around the colour wheel here, in between these colours then are the secondary colours. So in between red and yellow, you'll have your oranges. Between yellow and blue, you'll have your greens, and between blue and red, you'll go through to your purples and violets. So you can see here how the colours work on the colour wheel and sit between each other. So this side is generally known as the warmer colours. They're influenced by the reds and the yellows. And then this side is generally known as the cooler colours because they're influenced by the blues. And in colour, usually warmer colours come forward in a picture plane and cooler colours recede. So that's one thing to bear in mind. But these colours that sit beside each other on the colour wheel, so the red going through the oranges to the yellows, these are colours that work in harmony with each other. They harmonise, they're close together on the colour wheel. And so here the blues, going through the blues into the purples, they're harmonious colours. They sit well together. And then what you have is the colours, the opposite colours. So opposite red is green, opposite violet is yellow, opposite blue is orange. So you can think of that almost as black and white are opposites. These colours are opposites. So sometimes when you're working with colour, it can make it quite pleasing to the eye if you stick within harmonious colours. And if you want then to add in an opposite colour for an accent or something to just bring a bit of change. So that's a general sort of guideline and working within the felt tips. Now I'm going to look at the colour wheel using this range of highlighter pens. We have the same thing with the range of highlighter pens, from the yellow going through the orange, pinks, blues to greens, back to yellow again. And again, the same sort of idea. This side here are the warmer colours, influenced by the yellow tones, and this side and this area here are the cooler colours, influenced by the blues. The highlighter pens are much more sort of luminous and fluorescent compared to the felt tip pens, so it's quite a different look. But as I mentioned earlier, what's really lovely about these is the degree of transparency they have when you overlap them. So if I take this blue and overlap it with what was this darker pink here, then I'm creating a secondary colour, which is that purple. The same sort of applies if I take the orange and overlap it in here with the yellow. Again, I'm creating another kind of an orange. I don't know, they just seem to have a lot more transparency to me than the felt tip pen. So I thought I would use these highlighter pens to colour in the design that I have for you today, and we could look at how that works. But before we do that, I just wanted to mention just that idea of layering up colours. So if I take, for example, this yellow, and I lay that down first, and then I put the orange over that, which we just saw there on the colour wheel. So that's the section there with the orange. Sort of running it out the edge there so you can see what the orange looks like on its own and what it looks like with the yellow underneath. And then if I take the blue and I put that in over the top of all of those, so that's 3 colours altogether now. Then I create this kind of strange sort of green, browny green colour, which has a little bit of all 3 of those fluorescent colours in together, which I think gives a really nice variety, and you can use this in your colouring. So there's some other combinations that work quite well as well, and if you use the deep pink, and then add the blue into that. There's the violet that we looked at on the colour wheel. But if you add the green over the top of that too, you get this more sort of grey purple. And here's just that green over the pink. So that's something that I want to play with in our colour sheet that I'm going to work on today. So this is the design that I'm going to work on today, and I'm just going to use this range of the highlighter pens with the one addition of the red felt tip. This design is something that I drew that's just the kind of the view outside my window here of things in the garden. And it has, you know, a very definite foreground with larger leaves and strawberries in it, and then going away into the distance, grasses and smaller flowers. So to try to emphasize that in the design, I want to use warmer colors in the foreground and the cooler colors in the background that we talked about. So the greens that I use in the background of this design will be more to the blue greens, and the ones that I use at the front will be more to the yellow greens, which will make them warmer. So we'll give that a go, and we'll see. And oh yes, and one other thing I want to say is that there will be a lot of green in this, which is the odd bits of colour for the flowers, and then the strawberries will be in the reds, which is the idea of you know, contrasting colours on the colour wheel. The way we talked earlier about green being opposite red on the colour wheel, so it gives you a strong contrast. So we'll see how that works out. So this is the picture completed, and you can see the warmer greens in the foreground and the cooler greens in the background. So I'll just walk you through the steps of how I got to that point. First of all, to help me understand the foreground and the background a little more easily, I'm going to block in my main areas of warm and cool colours. So first of all, I'm going to start with the luminous yellow green, and I'm going to do all the colours that I want to be really warm coming forward in that, all the areas that I want to be warm and coming forward. So we'll start with that. Okay, next step, I'm going to start laying down the cool blues, and And so this is, I'm laying down the first colours, which I'm then going to put other colours on top of to layer it up to get the greens that I want. So the yellow will give the warm greens, and this blue will give the idea of the cooler greens. And what I like about this as well, I mean, I guess this design lends itself to it a little bit, but I'm not being ultra precious about this. I'm actually being fairly sort of fast. I mean, these highlighter pens have quite broad tips, chisel tips, that you can sort of get in and around the details, but you can't really be very precious with them. And I'm sort of trying to go for that style in this, a more sort of like colours that are overlapping and layering up rather than really keeping within those lines. I've never been that good at staying within the lines. So next I'm going to go in around this area here that has a lot of these little scribbly black lines in, and I'm going to use this sort of cool darker green to just go over all of that. It'll pick up on the white bits that are showing through, and it'll create this area of sort of darkness from which the bright flowers and the brighter leaves will come out from. Now I am going to go in with my mid-green, and I'm going to go over some of these darker greens, and I'm going to go over it some of the blue, which will then make that into the darker green that I'm looking for. So you can see now I've gone over it with the mid-green, and I've turned that blue into a sort of a darker green, and then the areas that were white previously that I've coloured with this green have come up more of a warmer sort of brighter green. So that's the background part done. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use this mid-green to go over some of these leaves and turn them a brighter green. But I'm going to be quite loose with it, and I'm not going to cover all area of this bright yellow. I'm going to make it almost kind of like painterly, very marky, so you get this variation in the leaves. So now I'm going to go back in with the blue, and I'm going to try to darken in some of these areas to get the idea of real sort of depth. But then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to sort of stagger some of the outlines as well, so it sort of has a bit of the blue sort of haloing around the grass and the flowery shapes. So it's really about building up the layers of colour in this. That's what I like, why I like these highlighters. I think with felt tips, I don't know, you don't seem to get quite the same layering of colours as easily. Plus it's very fast with these highlighter pens because they're broad tips. So now for a bit of fun, this is why I like using these two. I'm going to go in with this orange and lay it down as a base colour to create some of those unusual greens that I was talking about earlier when we looked at the colour wheel. But in the meantime, it looks pretty wacky. Okay, now time to turn these orange leaves and stalks into a variety of green. And I'm going to go over that orange with the blue to do that. So for these little strawberry flowers, which are white, and these which are little daisies, I'm going to leave the strawberry flower petals white. I'm going to colour the centres. And the daisies, I'm just going to colour a little bit of it to give the impression that they're white with pink centres. If you leave sort of too much white space, it can look a little bit left behind. So sometimes even just adding in a bit of pencil can take away from the white to give it something. But I'm just going to continue using what I've got here with these highlighters. So for the daisies, I'm going to just give them a little bit of a yellow centre. The yellow, because they are quite actually, no, sorry, not the daisies, the strawberry flowers. They are quite greenish yellow at their centres. I just sort of give them a little dab in there of the orange just to give them a little extra something. And then for the daisies, I'm going to take the pink and I'm just going to put in some little flecks coming out the centre. Which just gives them a little something, but still keeps the majority of the petals white. But I'm going to give those yellow and orange centres as well, just to give them some extra yellow, orange. I'm going to dot the orange on. Gives it a bit of variety. So all that's left now really is the strawberries, and I'm going to use, I'm actually going to use a mixture. I've got two red felt tips that are slightly different shades. I'm going to use that, and I'm going to use the pale pink highlighter pen to colour in the strawberries. First of all, I'm going to just do the little flecks in the pale pink. And you can see I'm not being very precious with this. I like this sort of marquee style where colours overlap and bits of white get left, and it creates another dimension and more texture. And then I'm going to go in with the red. I'm going to go in with the sort of more orangey, paler red first, and I'm going to draw circles around. And then start to colour that in. So that's more or less it. You can go in and neaten up if you've missed a few bits and you've got gaps that you want to fill in. You can continue to add the layers of colour, which will darken areas up. And then there's just the lettering to do. So I hope you enjoyed this video and that it was useful to help with understanding a little bit more about the colour wheel and how colour can be used, and also using these basic highlighter pens as a way of layering up and creating vibrant, colourful designs. Our artists in residence have been designing a lot of colour sheets that you can download and print off for and colour in yourselves. So make sure you take a look at those on the Arts Care for You channel. So that's all from me this time. We'd love to see your drawings and your colouring, so if you can take photographs and send them in to us at Arts Care, we'd be delighted to see what you've been doing.